Där, varsågod.
Tack. So welcome to this lunch webinar, which is part of a series of lunch webinars that we give on interdisciplinary science at SLU. I'm Marie Stenseke. I'm the director of the Interdisciplinary Academy at SLU. And today I will give a presentation on how to work practically with interdisciplinary research. We usually have a lot of invited speakers, but today I will have a presentation by myself. Before I start, I will just say a few more words about the Interdisciplinary Academy, or in short, IDA. It's an initiative at SLU that started in the fall 2022 and that aims at increasing knowledge and interest in interdisciplinary research among the researchers at SLU, and also to strengthen their ability to address research issues from interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary perspectives, and of course facilitate collaborations between scholars from various disciplines. The core of IDA are teams of researchers with different academic backgrounds that during 8 months work together on a complex research problem to jointly address this problem, and in doing so increase the knowledge of interdisciplinary working methods. And today I'm sitting in Ullbo at Ultuna, where those groups meet once a month. They get funding for 20% of their time to do this joint work. And we will open and call for new groups next week. So please be alert on seeing the announcement for working in IDA teams. These lunch webinars are presented by SLU, but I should also stress that it's of course open to anyone, both inside and outside SLU. And the kind of the structure is so I will give a presentation for about half an hour, and then we will open up for questions and discussions. And this will end at 5 to 1. And after that, we continue with a kind of more informal meeting for those of you who want to stay and have a possibility to stay on longer. And then we continue the discussion, so to speak. But by that, I will share my PowerPoint slide, and I just hope it will work well for me with this sharing. Or Karin has a copy. I'm just going to find the share screen mode.
Det funkar bra.
So, thanks. So this is my title, and I chosen to illustrate it with an old picture from 1939 even, as I've understood. I'm not really sure about the source, but this is the title in German is the scientific point of view, and showing all these different sciences. By that time, I think it's only men on the picture, but looking in various directions for truth, and no one really sees the nice field. I will talk about the practice of interdisciplinary work, and I'm afraid there will be a lot about how to overcome the number of challenges that is faced compared to just sitting in your own comfort zones and working with issues in a kind of more structured way that's set up within each and everyone's discipline. So because of that, I will start to saying something about the directions of interdisciplinary research, and I do that in a kind of personal way, since I'm certainly dedicated to interdisciplinary work myself. And for me, and also listen to others and colleagues working in a lot with interdisciplinarity, is what is attractive is it's intellectually stimulating in a broad sense, not just digging deep into your own competencies, but also being challenged, seeing the options, how this could be scaled up, the knowledge you deliver as a researcher when joining others that come with quite different competencies, quite different knowledge. And related to that is, of course, the possibility to produce applicable knowledge with the potential to make change. Looking into the real world problems and have that as a point of departure. And that very often demands that you collaborate between various fields of competences. And this kind of in that way to make an impact or contribute very, very kind of obviously to change is certainly a stimulation for many of us working in the field of interdisciplinarity. And it also then kind of logically follows that it helps you to get a broader network, both inside and outside academia. You see not just the colleagues in your own corridors, but also in the other corridors, other universities, and a number of other stakeholders that works in society with on other positions that you can interact with in order to frame the problem, but also to kind of help to see how you in your interdisciplinary work can get together in the best way to get good responses or contribute to solving real world problems. And I would say, though, I know some could dispute what it makes your career to work interdisciplinary. Personally, I would say it enhances interest in career options. It's not so that it's kind of, you can't go further as a researcher in interdisciplinarity. It's certainly a growing field. I guess a number of you also noticed in the calls that come from both Swedish funders, EU funders and other funders that they demand an increased level of cooperation between different disciplines. And I put here an illustration from Hagmark's MISTRA, a large research program that in fact was based here on SLU, and I entered as I could say I was in the stage just after postdoc when I started to work in Hagmark's MISTRA. Went on for 7 years. It was a meeting place between agronomists, biologists, historians, economists, and myself, who my background is in human geography. So I have a PhD in human geography. And we looked not just at our own fields, but we kind of put in the same physical landscape, the birds, the flowers, the bees, bumblebees, the grazing animals, the farmers, the outdoor recreationists and the kind of general public, and also the urban kind of context that most of us so kind of relate to when it comes to land use, both in agriculture but also when it comes to nature conservation. And it kind of fueled a lot of interesting discussions within those areas that I have been very grateful to have made that experiences. It's now about 20 years ago. Continuing from that, I've been working mainly in interdisciplinary groups related to land use and biodiversity, almost all my academic career, one could say. Also around outdoor recreation. It has led me into some number of conceptual issues, kind of how do we understand various concepts, into public participation and the collaboration between authorities and farmers, how to speak a language together that both understands, what both groups understands. I've been for 7.5 years, it was in the international lead of the Intergovernmental Platform for Biodiversity Ecosystem Services, IPBES. Also there in that role, pushing for how to increase or improve the work on interdisciplinarity. And besides being the director of IDA now, I'm also at the University of Gothenburg serving as a deputy dean of the School of Business, Economics and Law. So that's a kind of a mixture of backgrounds I have, but in my heart always been a human geographer. enough about me. Yeah, I promised that I will take you into challenges, but I will first say something what kind of the character of the challenges, and I will depart from the kind of field of biodiversity because that's the one I know best, but it doesn't say that's the only field where the challenges are. So I will try it also to kind of interpret it or transfer it into other areas, and I trust that you also can kind of see the parallels into your own fields. But having done that, we'll go into kind of practical issues, departing from my own experiences, but also others' experience, and an ongoing research project I'm into related to scenarios. It's an EU project where I've had the possibility both to do a literature studies, and also interview my colleagues from various different disciplines to kind of get a broader perspective of what has helped us, or what has been a real challenge that need to be addressed in that ongoing study. So that is, it's not just my own impression, I kind of capture from various fields. And I will end to say something more about IDA. But coming back to the challenges on this picture then, and what I'll kind of return to later in the talk, is when you meet with people from other disciplines, and I presume some of you have done so before, the experience is then we share that there is sort of kind of cultural divide when it comes to kind of the culture of disciplines. How you talk, what words you use, how you make a career, how you kind of relate to the internal debate versus the kind of what is outside of discipline, but also when it comes to domestic and international studies. I mean, take a discipline like law, for example, that is very much national because the laws are written largely nationally. In this is this language divide, what words and concepts, but also approaches you use. It is, when it comes to methods, certainly a divide often between if you've been working mainly with qualitative studies or quantitative studies, and kind of how that is framed and how you understand what is then those difficult questions I put in the end. What is really science? What can you say it's scientific evidence? What is knowledge? How is that kind of produced, and what is the legitimate way of producing knowledge, and how can you widen maybe your own frames in looking at it? And what is data? These three last ones are kind of questions that often come up when you look at or puzzles you when you work interdisciplinary. And there are now more questions, so that's why I put these are not the only ones, but these are some of the broad ones. Just framing interdisciplinary for a start, and this is my framing that's commonly used, but I know there are other ways of kind of dividing between multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity. In my understanding, the multidisciplinary, it's when you kind of do research from different disciplines that could be made in the same project, that are done in parallel on a joint topic. It's not so that kind of the ambition is to meet and make something added value of joining the disciplines. Interdisciplinary then, tvärvetenskap in Swedish, means combining research from different disciplines into one activity, really trying to make more of meeting between two different disciplines. And that is kind of the topic I will talk about, and the topic for IDA. Not to say that the multidisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity, that in my understanding this is when scientific research meets with knowledge domains outside academia. Those are also certainly important, but IDA has chosen to focus on interdisciplinarity because that's a field where a lot of work needs to be done. And it's kind of not instead of the other two, but this is the focus that SLU has chosen to work specifically on in IDA. I said I have my background in biodiversity and well, land use, I could say. My thesis was entitled Farmers and Landscape, eller Bonden och landskapet. And just to give the broad picture, I use a citation by a colleague in Australia, Leslie Head, saying that human influence on the earth and its processes increases, but most of our intellectual weapons in the environmental area have maintained a separation of humans and nature, as illustrated, I would say, by this picture where there are kind of two various globes and there are little arrows between, but we kind of frame them in a social system or ecosystem, when the world really looks like this. And you can see I talk as a geographer, but it's one globe. The physical aspects, biophysical aspects are integrated with the social aspects, with values, with ethics, and that kind of influences how we interact and influence both the physical but also how the physical non-human aspects influence our way of living. And that's why we need also, in order to find sustainable solution for a thriving globe, we need to be better at interacting. Having said that, I should say that interdisciplinary is not for all and everyone. You need to kind of, we still need some disciplinary research, but we need certainly to expand the capacity and capability to work interdisciplinary. Just a little figure I made myself, and this is based mainly on my experience, that related to this field of biodiversity then, but it could be translated to other kind of, to interdisciplinarity broad, I would say. So this I made partly in frustration and call it nature science attitude to social science humanities in biodiversity research that concerns human and the human society. Biodiversity is a field where kind of has been developed and quite naturally dominated in the biological sciences. And it's easy to think that since it's about nature, it's about biology or natural sciences. But if you're going to solve the problems, you certainly need to bring in humans. A lot of people with their competence in biodiversity also have recognized this. But this is kind of a spectra or gradient where it could be handled in different ways. Some I run into that kind of, they know we need to take in humans. Some even don't see the need to take it that it concerns study of humans. Some certainly realize that, but doesn't know that there are social science humanities research addressing those issues. Others, a bit better, say, well, we need social science humanities research, but it seems that I can do it myself. I mean, I kind of know what it is about, so I don't need any other competences in it. A bit better step is to say, well, I might some social science humanities scholars, but this is what you're going to do. This box is what you're going to fill. A bit further to the right is then, well, we invite them, we open for other perspectives, but we have a kind of a hierarchy of what is the most important perspective. As you see, I'm of course going to the right, and then we need to join to address societal challenges with a mutual aspect, and that is kind of the striving for interdisciplinarity. It's on that level we need to be working really to make it scientifically credible and also produce the most kind of the best results. And this, as I said, was about social science humanities entering biodiversity. You can translate it to other fields that might be dominated by economics or other disciplines. But coming to how to work interdisciplinary, I would say there are three core aspects, and I try to make it easy to divide it into three different P. People and the group composition together with the personalities of the group. It's about process and how we organize the work. And it is about perspectives, and I will probably spend most of the time on perspectives, but this has proven in many cases to be the kind of greatest challenges, the various concepts and frameworks we come with, and how could we bring something, make something joint in that. So starting with the people and the group. If you plan for interdisciplinary research, it's quite important to do a thoughtful team selection to make sure that you, I would say, I would strongly recommend some people with previous experience of interdisciplinary work that can bring those aspects in, but also can kind of see and foresee and help to plan for a good structure to the process I come to next, and know kind of what could be expected. There need to be some trust in the group, and I've got colleagues saying that it's good that some of the people in the group know each other from before, but it needs to be taken care of, that it's kind of not making certain dominance of the group by these that already knows each other. But that could be kind of that some knows each other foundation for creating trust in the whole group. It certainly helps if one likes each other. I mean, this is very soft aspects, but still, on the journey to good disciplinary results and outcomes, there is likely to be some kind of tricky discussions you need to go through, and then it's good if you kind of have a good feeling for each other and trust. It has also shown in some of the publication I looked into, and also in this Land to Sea, it has been raised that sometimes, or quite often, research publication or project applications are sent in, and they're written by the senior scholars, and they might write very nicely that this should be an interdisciplinary study and we should work together in various phases, and that's fine. And then not seldom we recruit young scholars to do the work, putting a quite heavy burden on young scholars that might just have had a PhD, might not sit in such a position they feel kind of their mandate to negotiate kind of the findings of the disciplinary culture with others, are weaker than for those seniors that have written the proposals. So that has somehow to be taken care of, that it's not just a kind of mature proposal, but the work then is expected to do by those that are much less experienced in one's own field, but also in kind of the broader context this addresses. I have a long list of personalities, and this is, I mean, yeah, it's personal issue, but it certainly is if you want to work with it, and if you want to do a good work. I hear from a number of voices that the listening skills might be the most important kind of attitude or part of your personality that's or people's personality in interdisciplinary work. The willingness to listen to others, to learn, and also to be challenged, but to kind of understand who are the others in the group. And in that, I mean, these are interlinked bullets, having an attitude to cooperate, not seeing the differences that will occur, because they will occur, as a problem, but more as a stimulating, okay, how do we handle this? Interlinked, once again, to have this curiosity to really try to understand, the desire to understand the reasons and motivations behind what others' approaches and methods, and trying to understand why people say the way, or the other researchers say the way, what they say, and why they conduct the research the way they do, and how they do validate the results, and so on. To understand and see, dig into these differences. And that kind of also goes down with the flexibility in approaches, so you're not stuck in one way of working, but also open for discussing other means or ways of working. It kind of goes without saying that you also need patience, because this kind of discussions and this kind of digging into each other's understandings, framings, methods, takes some time, and also takes some time to get the insights, how to best combine them. It also demands developing insights about your own perspective, the words or lingo you're you yourself are using, and also kind of a self-reflection on your work and how work is done in your own research field. And connected to what I said a bit earlier is that the interest in real-world problems and making an impact is also kind of for many a driving force to engage with interdisciplinary research. If we come to process, and looking into this project land to see, I mean, certainly studying it, but also it kind of confirms what's already said in a lot of literature in the field. It's communication and time are kind of the key aspects when you plan for how to do interdisciplinary work. You need to have a good, be on speaking terms, have a good structure for communication, and be open to have these dialogues and discussions. And that takes time, so that is why kind of the communication time are interlinked. Working on a project and making this communication but also work is you need to plan for interactions. You need to take time for meetings. It's not just putting all the same from different disciplines in a room and say now it works, but you need to, at first, as next bullet says, allow enough time early on for understanding the differences and understanding kind of the prerequisites when you listen to each other. And this little figure I put here, it's very simple, but these lines are, you work together closely in the beginning, having set them, and also then invest in team building and team bonding to make this the trust to be developed, so to speak. Then you can go away, do your own studies. Interdisciplinary doesn't mean that you sit on each other's lap all the time, but you need to plan for having regular interactions to come back. And then best cases, and this is kind of a message to funders, make sure that the research team get enough time also to have a time at the end to come together with their conclusions and kind of reflect on the process and really dig into the added value of this interdisciplinary work. Along the road here, and maybe in these small, shorter interventions, you need to handle different, diverse ways of doing empirical work and what that means and how that could be merged, or at least work in parallel, so it kind of gives an added value when you do your analysis and draw your conclusions. You need to handle it, that there are different publications processes and different culture of how you do the authorship list and so on, and these are issues that's very rarely come up, and you need to be prepared to face all of these. And there are more aspects, so I kind of put on some of this that very clearly come out in my studies. All of this needs skilled leadership. And it's also good to know that you're not the first. So build on previous experiences, build on what others have experienced, but also the publications that are out there written on interdisciplinary work, on games that kind of are there to help how to kind of come together and so on. And maybe you should have a facilitator. It could be useful to help to at least start a discussion how to look at what do we need to address in order to get a good process. So I come to perspectives, and I guess this is my main message. Handle your differences. Often we look at the similarities, like between those two men on the picture. Well, one is a man and one is a doll. And we see, well, we are almost the same. We're all scientists, we do this. But the trick, I would say, was interdisciplinarity. And I realized that by the years, it's to pay certain attentions to differences, that take care of them and make sure those are handled. Not to see them as a problem, as I said before, but recognize the differences and see how you can make an added value about your different approaches of ways you come in. So if you start working, pay certain attention to your differences. Recognize the different scientific cultures, as I mentioned. Respect other disciplines. So I mean, certainly myself, I'm a bit frustrated thinking, meeting peace, no, that's not the way you can do it. But respect that there are traditions in other disciplines, and I have learned that by years to be better in that. And also learning that there are limitations to my own discipline, and where are they? I cannot give all the answers myself, and that it helps with these real world problems to see, well, here certainly I need those and these, or we need this kind of knowledge to give a better answer. My discipline will not take us there. A core challenge, as I said before, is a qualitative divide, and I wouldn't say there's any real shortcuts, but just be aware of that you need to bring it together. There are a number of model and frames that you might find, but I mean, it's when those lists that is shown here, list of core indicators selected for the use in IPPES, when those kind of lists where they can have strong status meet the less easily captured nature's contributions to people, like the old man standing fishing, his experiences both in the landscape but also the activity in itself, and his kind of relation to the place itself, and how these are to be combined. You need to discuss. There are certain kind of modes and framings there to help you, but be prepared to meet that if you meet across that. And so in a publication that kind of framed it with these kind of interesting questions, if you come from the quantitative side, you're more likely to say, what's the answer to this question? If you come from a qualitative social science humanities side, you're more likely to say, so why is that the question you're asking? And you can see that these are the kind of discussions you need to be prepared for. Take care of difference in terminologies, and I would suggest a way forward that I've seen in many contexts now is to make a glossary, both of the words you use that you might use differently, words you use but just are kind of very into one discipline, and words that you need to have a joint understanding of. And this is from the assessment of IPPES on sustainable use of wild species, where there was thorough discussion in the author team on what is wild, what is use, and what is sustainable use. I won't get into detail here, but for those who want to hear more about that, please contact me later. But certainly no easy issues when you try to kind of make an assessment of the status of the research. And finally, or be open for creativity and plural ways forward, because that is always, I shouldn't say always, but it's often what is needed, that you might not always unify in one very strongly agreed field, but you might find plural ways forward, but still connecting to each other. And strive then, having said it, strive certainly for a framework where you can meet. And this is a framework I've borrowed from Luxus, a center at Lund University, where they framed and tried to see how you then fit problem-solving research with critical research. So it's not kind of polar positions, but critical research is there is very productive in together with problem-solving research, finding what are the critical issues, but also what are missed out. What do we need to improve in methods, in approaches, to be more accurate in solving the problems. So find this, and I just suggest some fields that I find useful: future, scale, landscape, meet in time, or in the very practice. While there are some risky concepts I see that often are understood differently, like drivers, modeling. Same with take a system approach, where they're part of, especially in the kind of social science humanities, that are not very, the system is not part of their approaches. There are a number of boundary objects or bridging concepts, and they are well worth looking into to see this we kind of fairly understand the right way, not getting stuck in sitting for years and trying to agree on what do we mean by landscape, but agreeing enough to be productive in joining forces in research. I just take an example of IPSO's conceptual framework that certainly have worked well in that sense, but I won't not have time to go into details. This is a link that SLU, where we started to build up a list of publications and other tools to work interdisciplinary. So please look at that website, and Karin will put it in the chat as well, but it will also be then on the when we in the recording of this presentation, where you can find assistance or inspiration how to work further. I will quickly just say something about the Interdisciplinary Academy, since we're soon coming out with the next the EDA 2.0, the second version of EDA, where we then are we will continue certainly to do webinars, but we are now calling for new thematic groups that get 20%, not 70, 20% of the time for 8 months, and these are only for SLU researchers that have a permanent position, or at least that position that lasts for the coming year after the 1st of November. To come together to work, preferably Wednesdays here at Ulbo once a month, but the other Wednesdays virtually, to dig into a complex issue that you need a set of disciplines to address. You'll see the publication of the call next week, on 5th of March. But here we'll plan for the continuing webinar series on interdisciplinarity. In some weeks, there will be a lunch webinar on how interdisciplinarity has affected academic careers by Jessica Abbott from Lund University. A number of inspiration webinars where we also will hope to make some matchmaking coming up this spring then for the application or the work with application and the call for the new EDA teams. And one of these meetings will also be where some of those the work as EDA researcher now will tell about their experiences. And then after that there will be a continuing with lunch webinar series in the autumn. Thanks. I'll stop sharing now. And I see there's come a lot in the chat. First, I just ask Karin, since I see there's 18 of it. Could you just support me a bit if you've seen some? Help me.
Absolutely. There are several interesting questions, and if you have some more questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hands. Emma Broberg at 1242 has an interesting question in the chat.
Okay, yeah, I see it. The role of young scholars in interdisciplinary research. What are your thoughts and spirits on interdisciplinary PhD projects? Well, I'm still to be convinced about how good it is to have interdisciplinary PhD students. I think both at student level, both at PhD student level, it's good to have a recognition about that you are not the only field in the research field in the world. Your discipline is one of many. I say this kind of in a generalizing tone, but too often I meet senior researchers that kind of doesn't know much about what's outside. So I think in order to improve interdisciplinarity, it's important to have courses where you meet other disciplines, students from other disciplines. I'm afraid if you make it your own studies very interdisciplinary the whole 4 years, so as it is in Sweden, you might have less to provide with in an interdisciplinary team. I mean, the point with interdisciplinarity is it's people with various disciplines and skills and competencies meet and make more of it. And then, and I would recommend to first get a good base in your own disciplines, but with a good recognition that this is one piece of knowledge, or this one way of doing it. This is one way of producing knowledge and produce kind of research results, and there are others that I need to kind of pay respect to. This doesn't say that I am totally against interdisciplinary PhD projects, but I'm a bit hesitant since, as said, if we are too many doing kind of the same things in PhD project, where we get too similar, so to speak, and in this complex world we need to have in-depth knowledge, and the trick for interdisciplinarity, I would say, is how to combine them. And then I think it's good that at least the majority has something kind of in-depth knowledge in your own sciences to put